Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second season of Been All Around This World, a podcast presented by the Association for Cultural Equity that explores the 7 decades of recordings made by folklorist Alan Lomax. My name is Nathan Salzberg. I'm curator of the Alan Lomax Archive, existing as that does in several digital iterations online, and working in tandem with our colleagues at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., where all of the original recordings are preserved in their entirety. August 2009 marks the 60th anniversary of the beginning of Alan Lomax and Shirley Collins' 2.5-month field recording trip throughout the American South that's come to be known as the Southern Journey. We'll be devoting this season of the show to exploring the recordings they made on this trip and using them as jumping-off places into some more detailed discussions of various Southern musical traditions, performers, instruments, etc. This trip is worthy of our attention for several reasons. First, it produced the debut recordings of 2 of America's foremost folk artists, one of them being Bessie Jones, native of South Georgia. She was living in the Georgia Sea Island of St. Simons in 1959 and singing with the spiritual singers of coastal Georgia, which soon came to be renamed the Georgia Sea Island Singers. And in the Mississippi Hill Country in the north of the state, Fred McDowell, a farmer and guitar player and singer who was soon to be known as Mississippi Fred McDowell, although he was originally from Rossville, Tennessee. Second, the Southern Journey was the first field recording trip to be made with stereo tape, which made a world of difference when it came to recording full sonic spectrum traditions like singing from the Sacred Harp and the black work songs of the Southern Prison Farm System, musical traditions which Lomax had tried using earlier technologies to document to varying degrees of success on acetate disc and later paper-backed mono tape. Stereo did indeed provide revelations to Alan, the performers, and audiences alike. As he wrote in 1993, quote, "This was 1959, and I finally had German mics and a Cadillac of a recorder and was doing stereo. You should hear the recordings. For me, a life's dream realized." And third, it was the first field recording trip of its kind to be underwritten by a major commercial record label, in this case Atlantic Records, who were able to distribute and promote the recordings to audiences who would never have had the opportunity to hear much of this music in the places where they lived. An effect of this is that as taste for and appreciation of unadulterated Southern folk music grew, and created a market for live performance, which a number of the older artists documented by Alan and Shirley could take advantage of. The 1950s had been a fruitful decade for Lomax. He had been based in London since 1950, escaping the heat of the McCarthy era, recording throughout Britain, Ireland, Spain, and Italy. He produced radio and television series for the BBC and edited 18 volumes of Columbia Records' World Library of Folk and Primitive Music. And when he arrived back in New York City in 1958, he found the urban folk revival in full bloom. Crowds of young banjo players, guitarists, fiddlers, and fans were gathering in Washington Square Park to pick and sing traditional songs and tunes, many of which Lomax had recorded years earlier from the likes of Leadbelly, Woody Guthrie, Hobart Smith, and Texas Gladden. That year, the Kingston Trio had a #1 Billboard hit with Tom Dooley, based on a version of the murder ballad that Frank and Ann Warner had recorded from North Carolina banjo player and singer Frank Prophet in 1940. The young revivalists were becoming proficient on their instruments, and with the help of Izzy Young's Folklore Center on MacDougal Street, they had access to hundreds of songs and albums, books, among them the Lomax's American Ballads and Folk Songs and Our Singing Country, and burgeoning folk music magazines like Sing Out. It was in Sing Out that Pete Seeger announced Alan's return. Quote, "Alan Lomax, considered by many America's foremost folklorist, left the USA an enfant terrible and returns a legend. I welcome him back, not just because he is an old friend, but because he is more responsible than any other single individual for the whole revival of interest in American folk music." End quote. Seeger concluded with a description of the cultural moment to which Lomax had returned and the unique place he held in it. Quote, "Well, of course, the folk song revival did grow and flourishes now like any happy weed, quite out of control of any person or party, right or left, purist or hybridist, romanticist or scientist. Alan Lomax probably looks about him a little aghast." End quote. Which, of course, Lomax did. Writing a reply to Seeger in Sing Out, Lomax took issue with the happy weed. The revivalists might pick a banjo fluently or boast a large repertoire of songs, but Alan said when those songs are, quote, ripped out of their stylistic contexts and sung, quote, well, they are at best changed. It would be an extreme form of cultural snobbery to assert, as some people do, that they have been, quote, improved. In my view, they have lost something, and that something is important. Writing 40 years later, Lomax was more blunt. Quote, some of the young folkniks who dominated the New York scene asserted that there was more folk music in Washington Square on Sunday afternoon than there was in all rural America. Apparently, it made them feel like heroes to believe that they were keeping a dying tradition alive. The idea that these nice young people who were only just beginning to learn how to play and sing in good style might replace the glories of the real thing frankly horrified me. I resolved to prove them wrong. End quote. In the late summer of 1959, Lomax began making arrangements for his field recording trip throughout the South. He approached Atlantic Records, run by the Ertegun brothers, Ahmet and Shui, who had just wrapped up a profitable stretch of hit records by Ray Charles, Clyde McPhatter, Bobby Darin, and the Coasters. Atlantic had also just begun recording in stereo, and as fans of early jazz and R&B, the Erteguns were personally invested in Allen's project. Thus, accompanied by the young English folk singer Shirley Collins, whom he had met in London several years earlier, Lomax left New York City in late August. For the next 2.5 months, the pair traveled through Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, West Virginia, Mississippi, Arkansas, Georgia, and North Carolina, making over 70 hours of recordings. They started in Southwest Virginia, where a number of old-timers who Lomax had recorded many years before were still living and making music, foremost among them the siblings Hobart Smith and Texas Gladden. Hobart was still more than proficient at a number of instruments, among them fiddle, banjo, piano, and guitar, and Texas was still singing, although her performances were mitigated a bit by the fact that she was suffering from a goiter in her neck, as well as general chronic ill health, but she still sang some of the beautiful children's songs that she was known for in the community, particularly among her grandchildren. We'll hear Hobart Smith's impossibly influential version of Railroad Bill, followed by Texas Gladden and her singing of Whole Heap of Little Horses. Thanks for listening to Been All Around This World.
Railroad Bill, title of the song here.
Sandy, you want to go bye-bye? You want to go bye-bye? You want to Granny Ma to sing Whole Heap of Little Horses? Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, little baby. When you wake, get some cake and ride them pretty little horses. Black and a bay, sorrel and a gray, whole heap of little horses. Black and a bay, sorrel and a gray, whole heap of little horses. Little old horse, little old cow, ambling around the old hay mow. Little old horse, he took a chew, darned if I don't, said the old cow too. Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, little baby. When you wake, get some cake and ride them pretty little horses. Black and a bay, sorrel and a gray, whole heap of little horses. Black and a bay, sorrel and a gray, whole heap of little horses.
Over a dozen years had passed since Lomax had last seen the siblings Hobart Smith and Texas Gladden. In 1946, they had left their homes in the Blue Ridge Mountains for a trip to New York, where they performed a concert with Gene Ritchie at Columbia University, and participated in a session at Decca Records, where Lomax was then serving as a producer of an American folk music album series. Some of those recordings were released in 1946 on Mo Ash's disc label, the forerunner to Folkways, and combined with Lomax's 1959 recordings, deeply inspired many young folk revivalists who began earnestly copying Smith's style, particularly his performance of Railroad Bill. As Stephen Wade has written later, quote, "To be able to play it was a mark of expertise. Smith had learned it from an albino named Bob Campbell, whom he met as a young man in Saltville, Virginia's Smoky Row, near the train depot. As he later told his banjo student Fleming Brown, he was a tenor, had white eyebrows, great big tall fellow. His eyes would just dance in his head when he played that Railroad Bill. And of all my traveling since, of all the colored people I've heard play it, of all the men I have ever heard play it, I've never heard a man who could beat Bob Campbell playing Railroad Bill. Ah, he was wonderful. Ain't no question about it." On a personal note, the first song I ever remember falling in love with was a version of Railroad Bill which reached me maybe 4 or 5 or 6 degrees removed from Hobart Smith through my dad, who had learned to play it. I suppose through the urban folk tradition, as that song moved around from player to player. I first heard a recording of it through the Kingston Trio's highly expurgated version of the 1950s. In any case, it was every bit the inspiration I needed to pick up the guitar. In some ways, I feel like the rest of my life will be a chase of perfecting Hobart Smith's version of Railroad Bill. Meantime, in the early 60s, Hobart was going on old age pension and worrying about his future. In 1963, Allen helped arrange concerts for him at Chicago's Old Town School of Folk Music, at Club 47 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and for the Friends of Old Time Music in New York. A Newport Folk Festival appearance came in the summer of 1964. In this period, as John Cohen has written, quote, "Hobart Smith's music was as fine and as distinctive as it was when he made his early recordings, but his chances of achieving the stature of his contemporaries, by which I imagine he means folks like Roscoe Holcomb or Clarence Ashley, with whom Hobart had traveled in the late teens on a medicine show circuit, they were cut short by his death. Smith's health began failing later that year, and he died in January of 1965. Lomax considered Texas one of the 3 best ballad singers he ever recorded, the others being Almeda Riddle of Arkansas and Scotland's Jeannie Robertson. And he wasn't alone in admiring her. Several folklorists had collected her songs in the 1930s, and 2 years after hearing her sing at the White Top Festival in Virginia in 1933, Eleanor Roosevelt invited Texas and Hobart Smith to perform at the White House. As I said, although her singing had been diminished by ill health, she did record a number of shorter pieces for Lomax and Collins in 1959, some love songs, some ballad verses, and lullabies sung to her granddaughter Cynthia Tuttle, who you might have heard there addressed as Baby Cindy. Despite her popularity, she was never much inclined to travel for the concerts that the folk revivalists were putting on in the mid-60s, the ones that Hobart Smith tried his best to attend. Besides, when Lomax wondered why she'd never made much, quote, professional use of her singing, she replied that she'd been too busy raising babies. When you bring up 9, you have your hands full. All I could sing was lullabies. Texas Gladden died in 1967. We'll hang around Southwest Virginia for a few more minutes before heading further south to Mississippi. Down the road from where Hobart and Texas lived, respectively, in Bluefield and Salem, we'll find Galax, Virginia, where a string band comprised of Uncle Charlie Higgins, Uncle Wade Ward, and Bob Carpenter recorded a version of the dance tune Did You Ever See the Devil, Uncle Joe, on August 31st, 1959. It's been all around this world. Thanks for listening.
Sun rose this morning, baby, Lord, I was laying down on my floor. Lord, the sun rose this morning, I'm laying down on my floor. Lord, I knew a woman to love me, baby, but no place to going somewhere I ain't never been before. Lord, Lord, I'm going somewhere I ain't never been before. Lord, Lord.
A trio led by a man who would soon be known around the world as Mississippi Fred McDowell, recorded on the first day of fall, 1959, in Como, Mississippi. Alan and Shirley visited the hill country in North Mississippi in 1959 on their southern journey, following up on some of the older musicians that Alan had recorded some 17 years earlier in 1942, namely the multi-instrumentalist and band leader Sid Hemphill. In addition to revisiting Hemphill, Alan also found the music of the Pratcher brothers, an old-time black country dance duo, string band team, and the fife and drum music of the Young Brothers. Recording the Pratchers in Como, Shirley Collins remembered feeling a twinge of disappointment when a much younger man showed up wearing his overalls from a day in the field and carrying a guitar. But as soon as he started to play, she and Alan realized they were in the presence of absolute genius. That man was Fred McDowell. After Fred recorded several of his solo blues, he was joined by his neighbor Miles Pratcher on second guitar and his sister Fanny Davis on a comb wrapped with tissue paper, making the sound of the kazoo. Fanny Davis was also a singer at the Hunter's Chapel in Como, and in 1966 she provided the lead vocal on Fred's first recorded version of You Got to Move, which the Rolling Stones, of course, later made, for better or for worse, into his signature song after it appeared on their Sticky Fingers album. Before Fred McDowell, we heard a tune from the trio of Uncle Charlie Higgins, Uncle Wade Ward, and Bob Carpenter, recorded in Galax, Virginia. Wade was long known to Alan Lomax and long known to music fans of Southwest Virginia. He was the scion of a musical family whose roots down there went back generations. He learned to pick the banjo at 11 and play the fiddle at 16. By the time he was 18 years old, he and his older brother Davy Crockett Ward were playing as a duo popular for dances, house raisings, and other social functions around their home in Independence, Virginia. Wade recorded commercially, both solo and with his Buck Mountain Band, for the OK label in the late 1920s. Alan's father, John A. Lomax, recorded him in 1937 with Davy Crockett's string band, the Bog Trotters, solo with banjo and fiddle, and with his nephew Fields Ward. Alan, with Pete Seeger in tow, met Wade in 1939 at the Galax Fiddlers Convention, and after another session in 1941, it brought the total number of Library of Congress recordings featuring Wade Ward to nearly 200. Uncle Charlie Higgins was 81 years old in 1959, and he and Wade had known each other and played together for many decades. Their regular gig was as the house band at Parsons Auction Company, in which capacity they helped diffuse many heart-rending episodes of household liquidation brought on by debt or death with musical distraction. As he explained to Lomax, quote, "We kindly entertain the crowd and make it possible so when they get on to a little squabble there, we can help them straighten it out by fiddling a little." You're listening to Been All Around This World, the first episode of our second season, which will be devoted in its entirety to exploring recordings made by Alan Lomax and Shirley Collins on their 1959 Southern Journey field recording trip. We'll get into this in greater depth in a few episodes, but because we mentioned their names, I'd like to play something from the Young Brothers Fife and Drum Band, later to be christened the Como Fife and Drum Corps, the Southern Fife and Drum Corps, rather, when they appeared at the Newport Folk Festival in the early 1960s. This is a rare instance of a sacred tune as performed by a fife and drum ensemble. Usually their music was strictly for dancing at hill country get-togethers and picnics and the like. A tune you might recognize from other more sacred contexts. Church, I Know We Got Another Building Not Made with Hands. Then we'll turn our attention to some of the work songs that Lomax documented at the Mississippi State Penitentiary, better known as Parchman Farm.
Another building, church, I know,
so glad when the sun goes down.
When the sun goes down,
I'll be so glad when the sun goes down.
when the sun goes down,
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
but I wanna lie down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
I wanna lie down, baby. I wanna lie down.
Wanna lie down.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
But I wanna lie down.
Oh, what got the matter, baby? Yeah, I can't see.
I can't see.
Oh, what got the matter, baby? Yeah, I can't see.
I can't see.
No, the sergeant and the driver's both is down on me.
Put down on me.
No, the sergeant and the driver's both is down on me.
Put down on me.
Just chop your corner like I chop mine. Just chop your corner like I chop mine. Well, you won't be worried when the sun go down.
When the sun goes down,
You'll never be worried when the sun go down.
when the sun goes down,
Oh, I do. My Lord, yeah.
when the sun, yeah,
Cry, oh, I do. My Lord, yeah.
Lord, yeah,
I made you a living when I was free.
when I was free,
I made you a living when I was free.
when I was free,
I'm in a world of trouble. You won't write to me.
won't write to me,
I'm in a world of trouble. You won't write to me.
won't write to me,
Won't write to me, baby. You won't write to me.
won't write to me,
I'm in a world of trouble. You won't write to me.
won't write to me,
You know the kitties in the river turning, go round and round.
round and round,
You know the kitties in the river turning, go round and round.
round and round,
And the flywheel knocking out. Oh, Bama,
Alabama bound,
You know the flywheel knocking out. Oh, Bama,
Alabama bound,
You know the kitty left Memphis, she had 100 men. You know the kitty left Memphis, she had 100 men. He got the Arkansas City and didn't have but 10. She got the Arkansas City and didn't have but 10. Didn't have but 10. I don't. She didn't have but 10. She got the Arkansas City and didn't have but 10. You know the captain told Pilot 4 that kitty was me. You know the captain told the Pilot 4 that kitty was me. He cried bitch, but in Greenville gonna be her tree. He cried bitch, but in Greenville gonna be her tree. You know Arkansas City gonna be the turn around. He cried Arkansas City gonna be the turn around. You know the kitty and the Jim Lee had a race one day. You know the kitty and the Jim Lee they had a race one day. You know the kitty knocked water in the Jim Lee's face. You know the kitty knocked water in old Jim Lee's face. Old Jim Lee's face. Old Jim Lee's face. You know the kitty knocked water in old Jim Lee's mud.
I'll Be So Glad When the Sun Goes Down, a work song led by Ed Lewis with a group of prisoners armed with hoes at Parchman Farm, the Mississippi State Penitentiary, in the fall of 1959. The work songs and field hollers of black prisoners in the Southern Penitentiary system was of abiding interest to Alan Lomax and his father throughout both of their collecting careers, and we'll be devoting a discrete episode to the discussion of that tradition, thankfully extinct now in 2019. For now, I'll tell you that this particular hoeing song might have been sung while clearing weeds out of a drainage ditch or clearing up a crop, was led by Ed Lewis, who was 36 years old at the time. He had another 17 and a half years of his sentence remaining when Alan recorded him.
Run here, black woman. And sit on daddy's knee. I got something to tell you, pretty mama. Don't you holler lie. Well, I'm going out in Texas, black woman. To hear that one more. If you don't want to suit me, black woman, I'm going to hide my bell cow home. Don't my clothes look lonesome? Hanging on the line. You know my kitchen feel lonesome, black woman. When my biscuit roller gone. Run here, black woman. And sit on daddy's knee. I got something to tell you, black woman. Don't you holler loud.
Quite simply, one of the most talented singers this country ever produced. That was Vera Ward Hall performing The Wild Ox Moan at her home in Livingston, Alabama, recorded by Alan Lomax and Shirley Collins on October 10th, 1959. Adele Vera Ward Hall was born in 1902. She worked all of her life as a washerwoman, nursemaid, and cook. She first came to the attention of John A. Lomax, Alan's father, in 1937, when Ruby Pickens Tart, who was a folklorist and the chair of the Federal Writers Project of Sumter County, Alabama, introduced the two of them. John A. recorded Vera during 3 separate sessions in 1937, 39, and 40, writing that she had what he called the loveliest voice I have ever recorded. She sang Baptist hymns with her cousin Doc Reed and other friends in Livingston, but she was also willing to record blues, ballads, and what she called worldly songs like Stagger Lee, John Henry, and This Field Holler that she had learned from her friend Rich Amerson. These songs were forbidden by her closest family. Alan Lomax met Vera in 1948 when he arranged for her and Doc Reed to come to New York City for an American music festival. Their time together resulted in 6.5 hours of recordings and the raw material for her oral history, which Lomax published as half of his book The Rainbow Sign in 1959. In that book, she's called Nora to protect her identity and honor her confidences. The 1959 recordings made by Lomax and Collins of Vera Hall were her last recordings. She died just a couple years later in 1964. Alan wrote her obituary in Sing Out, and I quote, "The sound comes from deep within her when she sings, from a source of gold and light, otherwise hidden, and falls directly upon your ear like sunlight. It is from singers like Vera Hall that all of us who love folk music in America have everything to learn. Her performances were all graced with dignity and love." We're making our way through our by no means representative survey of the 1959 Southern Journey of Alan Lomax and Shirley Collins, and we'll turn to music recorded over 2 days in Fife, Alabama, in the northern part of the state, at that year's United Sacred Harp Musical Association convention held at the Corinth Baptist Church. As this is a survey, I'm going to punt on some of the more in-depth discussion of the Sacred Harp tradition, as, again, we will have an episode devoted to it coming up shortly. For now, I'll simply let the singing from the Sacred Harp speak for itself, with page 112 in the Sacred Harp hymnal, The Last Words of Copernicus. And I will tell you that Alan Lomax was especially pleased by the results that his Ampex stereo tape machine got at this singing. It had been 17 years since he last tried to record Sacred Harp, at that time in Birmingham, Alabama. In cahoots with the Sacred Harp scholar George Pullen Jackson, they were forced to use what then was the state-of-the-art technology, acetate disc, which of course was highly monophonic in playback.
Miss Johnson down from Atlanta way right along. She lives in Atlanta, but she won't own it.
The singers of the United Sacred Harp Musical Association at their 1959 convention held in Fife, Alabama, singing page 112 in the Sacred Harp, The Last Words of Copernicus. It was at the Corinth Baptist Church in Fife where Alan Lomax and Shirley Collins recorded the proceedings of that year's United Convention in the midst of their Southern Journey field recording trip, which is the focus of this episode and this season of the Been All Around This World podcast, to which you are listening. It's worth saying, perhaps, that this trip was not actually called the Southern Journey until it was issued, not in fact on Atlantic Records, although they were the underwriters of the project, but on Prestige Records. It turns out that Atlantic Records took the several volumes of recordings that they wanted, leaving the rest for Alan to issue elsewhere, which he did in late 1960. Atlantic's series was called the Southern Folk Heritage Series, and it was Prestige that gave the albums the name The Southern Journey, which this trip has been called ever since. We'll wrap up our survey of this trip with just two more songs. Again, by no means are we geographically or stylistically being representative or attempting to be. The last two recordings we'll hear will be drawn from the Arkansas Ozarks and the Georgia Sea Islands, respectively. First, we'll hear from Granny Riddle. Almeda Riddle, a native of Cleburne County, Arkansas, was one of America's foremost traditional singers and ballad collectors for many years. And although tornadoes, which of course were a common scourge of northwestern Arkansas, had killed her husband and her son, destroyed her home, and had once wiped out her treasured handwritten collection of ballads, she was still dedicated to seeking out and preserving the old songs when Lomax first visited her in 1959. We'll hear her performance of Rainbow Midlife's Willows, the macabre tale of a young woman imprisoned by her family to keep her from her lover. It's also known in America as Locks and Bolts. It's descended from a British broadsheet published first in 1631 as The Constant Lover. Riddle told Alan and Shirley that she discovered the text in a notebook kept by a girl who had been dead for over 40 years. It was stored away among this girl's effects in her grandmother's attic. When Almeda brought it home, she found that her father could recall its first and last verses, as well as its tune. She sings that here. Granny Riddle was one of these older singers who became a fixture on the folk festival circuit after these recordings were issued in 1960. Lomax's 1959 recordings were her first. Granny Riddle died in 1986.
Last night I dreamed of my true love. All in my arms I held her, but I awoke, she was not there. Now I must live without her. Her yellow hair like strands of gold was streaming over my pillow. Oh, she's the only one I love, my rainbow in the willow. I'd search for high and I search for low. I made some low inquiries, but they all said no, we've seen no such. We would have no such in our keeping. But when she heard from me those words, she whispered low at her window, oh, darling, I'd be in your company, but locks and chains doth hinder. Now when I heard those words of hers, I swore that room I would enter, or I would forever know the reason why she was locked and chained within there. But up stepped her father, stern and wise, like wise two stalwart brothers. Before you enter that locked room, in your life's blood you wallow. They've taken away my untrue love, and tears now wet my pillow. Oh, she's the only one I love, my rainbow mid life's willows.
Alan Lomax first visited the Georgia Sea Island of St. Simons in 1935 under the auspices of the Archive of Folksong at the Library of Congress. It was on this trip that his fellow researcher, the folklorist and writer Zora Neale Hurston, famously darkened his face with walnut juice oil so as not to call the authorities' attention to their interracial traveling party. It was also where he first heard the remarkable musical traditions of the Sea Islands. 2 years earlier at St. Simons, a group of local singers had been organized by Lydia Parrish, the wife of painter Maxfield Parrish, who christened this group the Spiritual Singers of Coastal Georgia. Parrish was devoted to preserving, through performance and publication, the antebellum singing traditions of the black residents of the Sea Islands, their spirituals, shouts, ring plays, and work songs, many of which had roots stretching back through slavery and into the Caribbean and West Africa. Among the members of the spiritual singers that Lomax met in 1935 were fisherman Henry Morrison and Big John Davis, a former sailor and stevedore, and a singer with a huge repertoire of shanties, roustabout songs, slavery-era ring plays, and religious material. He met them again when he and Shirley visited St. Simons in 1959, at which time the spiritual singers of coastal Georgia had been enriched tremendously by the inclusion of a singer from Dawson, Georgia, named Bessie Jones. Bessie had moved to the island not so long after Lomax first visited, giving her ample time to introduce her massive repertoire of black vernacular song and games and plays to the spiritual singers and to the island at large. As I mentioned earlier, the meeting of Alan Lomax and Bessie Jones in 1959 was one of the greatest rewards of the Southern journey, and their collaboration would last well into the mid-1960s. Alan would soon invite her to New York City to record her oral biography. It stretched to some 30 hours of reminiscences, tall tales, ghost stories, jokes, and the two of them collaborated on a plan to turn the Spiritual Singers of Coastal Georgia into a touring act to take advantage of the venues that were becoming available through the urban folk revival. They would soon rechristen the group the Georgia Sea Island Singers, a group that is still maintained today by Bessie Jones' former daughter-in-law, Frankie Quimby, and her husband, Doug. It should be noted this has been done against somewhat great odds, given the fact that St. Simons and the other coastal islands of South Carolina and Georgia have been hemorrhaging their black populations over the past few decades as traditional communities have been pushed out to make room for more and more tourist resources, such as golf courses and luxury hotels. We'll hear a song called Moses, Moses, Don't Get Lost, recorded at St. Simons, October 12, 1959, led by Big John Davis, and joined by Joe Armstrong, Jerome Davis, Peter Davis, Henry Morrison, Willis Proctor, Ben Ramsey, and Bessie Jones. And with the Georgia Sea Island Singers, we will conclude our first episode of our second season of Been All Around This World, devoted as it is and will be to the 1959 Southern Journey field recording trip made by Alan Lomax and Shirley Collins. Thank you very much for listening. We look forward to having you next time. This is a production of the Association for Cultural Equity. My name is Nathan Salzberg. I'm curator of the association's Alan Lomax Archive. Find out more about it at culturalequity.org. Through research.culturalequity.org, you can discover all of the post-Library of Congress Alan Lomax recordings made on the Southern Journey and throughout the world. You'll also find a podcast link with some resources for further reading and listening. The Southern Journey recordings have been issued and represented in a number of releases over the years, many of which are still available in some capacity online, as well as a photo book and a memoir by Shirley Collins. You can find those all on the Cultural Equity site. Thanks again for listening, everyone. If this is your first time listening to the program, we invite you to subscribe via iTunes or Stitcher or anywhere fine podcasts are made available. Hope to see you next time. Take care.
Oh, Moses, Moses, don't get lost in that Red Sea. March on and come across. Oh, in that Red Sea. Oh, Moses, Moses, don't get lost. Oh, in that Red Sea. March on and come across. In that Red Sea. Let's just talk about the most like the Lord. Let's talk about the most like the Lord. Let's just talk about the most like the Lord. Let's talk about the most like the Lord. Ain't no Pharaoh in the most like the Lord. Pharaoh in the most like the Lord. Ain't no Pharaoh in the most like the Lord. Pharaoh in the most like the Lord. about the host got then old Pharaoh and the host got Pharaoh and the host got oh, Moses, don't get lost. Smart Joe, Lord, and come across. Stop and talk about the host got talk about the host got stop and talk about the host got talk about the host got then old Pharaoh and the host got Pharaoh and the host got then old Pharaoh and the host got Pharaoh and the host got hey, Moses, don't get lost. Not your Lord and come across. Stop now, talk about the host got talk about the host got stop, let's talk about the host got